The Abbey Caves adventure was meant to be an exciting and educational trip for Year 11 students. Located just outside Whangarei in Northland, New Zealand, the caves are famous for their stunning rock formations and limestone passages. They attract many adventurers and school groups, but they also come with risks. The caves are largely unregulated, and they can flood quickly during heavy rain, making them dangerous, especially for those without experience. The trip was intended to challenge and inspire the students, but the conditions inside the caves would soon take a tragic turn. Before we dive into video, please subscribe our channel. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Before the trip, the weather raised concerns among both parents and the school. A thunderstorm warning was issued for Northland, and heavy rain was expected later in the day. Despite these warnings, the school had already successfully conducted a caving trip the previous day with a different group of students. This led the school to feel confident about proceeding with the next trip. However, some parents began to worry. One parent emailed the school the night before, asking if the trip was still happening due to the weather. After receiving reassurance from the school, they decided to keep their child home. Karen's mother, Alicia Toki, shared similar concerns and sent an email at 8:42 p.m. asking if the caves were safe. The school's response, received at 9:58 p.m., assured her that they were monitoring the weather closely and the trip would proceed as planned, as they expected the rain to start only after 3 p.m. Trusting this, Alicia let Karen go on the trip the next morning. Despite the weather concerns, the school decided to continue with the trip. The morning of May 9th, the school checked the weather again, but there were no new warnings for the area. The storm was hovering over a different part of the region, and no immediate threats were seen for Whangarei. By 7:30 a.m., the group of 17 students, a teacher, and an adult arrived at Abbey Caves. The rain was light, and the students suited up in overalls, helmets, gumboots, and headlamps, leaving their phones behind in the van as they entered the caves. The school had decided that only Organ Cave would be explored to minimize risk, but no one anticipated how quickly conditions would worsen. Despite the increasing risks, the decision to proceed with the trip was made, and the group entered the caves, unaware that the weather outside was about to take a dangerous turn. The group began their exploration of Organ Cave, enjoying the peaceful beauty of the underground passage. The air was cool and damp, and the students marveled at the glowworms that illuminated the cave with their faint blue-green light. The water in the cave was shallow, barely reaching their knees, and everything seemed calm. As they ventured deeper, the passage split into two, and they took the upper route, where the cave ceiling arched higher. The group lingered, captivated by the eerie glow of the glowworms, until the teacher noticed something strange. The gentle flow of water was no longer as calm. The water level had risen, and the sound of rushing water echoed through the cave. The teacher checked the water depth and realized it was higher than before, signaling that something was wrong. Despite the initial sense of wonder, the group was now in a rapidly changing and dangerous situation. As the water levels continued to rise, panic set in. The teacher quickly realized they needed to leave the cave before the situation worsened. The once calm passage was now flooded, and the water was rising fast, reaching waist height and moving rapidly. The group scrambled to make their way back to the entrance, but the water was pushing them off balance, making it difficult to move. The teacher shouted for the students to hold on to each other and stay together. As the water surged, some students lost their footing and were swept off balance. The weight of their waterlogged overalls and gum boots made it even harder to stay upright. The panic grew as some students struggled to maintain their position, and the water's force became overwhelming. In the chaos, Karen found himself in the worst possible spot, in the path of the strongest current, where the water was pulling him deeper into a dangerous hole in the cave floor. Karen was swept into a deep hole in the cave floor, where the floodwaters had created a dangerous vortex. The water, now rushing violently, pulled him off balance, and he slipped into the hole before he could react. His classmates watched in horror as Karen was dragged by the current, struggling to stay afloat. One student reached out and tried to grab him, but the water was too strong. The student tried desperately to pull Karen to safety, using all his strength, but the current was relentless. Karen's body was twisting and being pushed into a gap between two large boulders. Despite the student's best efforts, the water kept pulling Karen down, and he slipped further away. For a brief moment, Karen's body shifted upward slightly, but a sudden surge of water dragged him back down into the crevice. His grip slipped free, and in an instant, Karen was gone, swept completely under the water. His classmates were left frozen in shock, unable to save him. Outside the cave, the situation was becoming increasingly urgent. At 10:35 a.m., an emergency call was made, and rescuers rushed to Abbey Caves. The remaining 16 students, soaked and shivering, stood near the cave entrance, stunned by the events that had unfolded. Some clung to each other for support, while others sat in silence, trying to process what had happened. Karen's family arrived at the scene, anxiously waiting for any sign of him. However, the floodwaters inside the cave were still too high, preventing rescue teams from entering. Despite the presence of emergency responders, the situation was too dangerous for immediate action. For hours, the family and rescuers waited, as the water inside the cave remained too strong to navigate. At 7 p.m., the floodwaters began to recede, allowing the rescuers to finally enter the cave and begin their search for Karen. The wait was agonizing, but it would soon lead to the tragic discovery of his body. By 7 p.m., the floodwaters finally began to recede, allowing rescuers to enter the cave. Using underwater optical cameras, they searched the dark submerged crevices where the water had forced everything to settle. After hours of searching, they found Karen's body pinned between two boulders, caught in a narrow gap where the water had swept him. At 9 p.m., they successfully retrieved his body. Outside the cave, Karen's family had been waiting all day, hoping for good news, but their worst fear was confirmed. This was not just a tragic accident. It was a clear warning about the power of nature and the dangers of underestimating it. In the aftermath, investigations revealed that the school had failed to properly assess the risks, despite multiple weather warnings. In 2024, the school's board was charged with exposing students to serious harm, and by July 2024, they pleaded guilty. The court ordered them to pay over $500,000 in reparations, acknowledging the devastating impact on Karen's family and classmates. The Abbey Caves tragedy highlights the critical need for thorough risk assessments, especially when engaging in outdoor activities with students. Schools and organizations must prioritize safety, closely monitoring weather conditions and ensuring that adequate precautions are taken before any trip. This event serves as a stark reminder of how nature's unpredictability can have devastating consequences when proper precautions are not followed. It's essential to listen to concerns from parents and evaluate the safety of each outing carefully.